What if much of what you thought you knew about a historical group was, well, surprisingly incomplete? Today, we are taking a deep dive into the remarkable truth about women convicts transported to Australia. We're challenging some long-held assumptions and unearthing stories of incredible resilience.
That's right. Between 1788 and 1853, something like 25,000 women were sent out to Australia as convicts. And our sources, including really deep research from historian Babette Smith, they reveal these women were far from just passive victims.
Right.
They were incredibly active, actually, shaping their own lives and really the whole fabric of the early colony.
Okay, let's unpack this a bit because the sources paint a picture of incredibly feisty, proud women, really resilient individuals. You might expect stories of just pure despair. But what we found is, well, it's a much richer narrative, much more complex.
Yeah, and what's fascinating here is how these records, they don't just show survival, they show thriving. And for some, believe it or not, even a conscious choice for transportation. So our mission today really is to extract those surprising truths about these women, their crimes, their lives out in the colonies, and the often really contradictory legacies of figures like, well, Molly Morgan, who we'll get into.
And yeah, to really bring this to life, we'll explore her story, Molly Morgan. Her life is just so compelling. It really embodies so many of these surprising qualities. So let's start with a general overview. These defiant women, as the sources sometimes frame them, what do the records tell us about their crimes, their character?
Well, okay, first off, they were almost entirely thieves. That's the main thing. And many were incredibly skilled at it. You can sort of picture a group entering a busy shop, right? Maybe two cause a distraction, talking loudly to the shopkeeper, while a third one is deftly, licking ribbons or a bolt of cloth, that kind of thing.
What's that?
Or they were cutting pickpockets. And then there were prostitutes who were also quite adept at robbing the men they encountered.
It's really striking, though, that the vast majority were nonviolent. The sources suggest only about, 1% committed violent crimes? And even those were often accidental.
Exactly. There's one really sad account, isn't there? A woman found guilty of manslaughter because some boiling water accidentally splashed a toddler.
Oh, terrible.
And the child tragically died. So, yeah, violence wasn't really their main domain.
And their character. How are they described?
Consistently. Feisty, proud, and remarkably stoic. That comes through again and again. You read the newspaper reports from their trials, and there were quite detailed reports back then, and they rarely mention women crying.
Really?
Yeah. There's this one fantastic account, an older woman in the dock with a younger one who is weeping. And the older one just turns to her quite bluntly and says, "What are you weeping for? I wouldn't give them the satisfaction."
Wow. That just says it all, doesn't it? That kind of spirit.
It really does. It encapsulates that sort of unyielding attitude.
That level of mental fortitude is, remarkable. And it gets even more complicated, doesn't it? What about their motivations? Did some women actually want to be transported? It seems so counterintuitive.
That's one of the most surprising things. Absolutely. Yes, some did. You have to remember, word got back from Botany Bay, whispers, letters maybe, suggesting there were actual opportunities out there, especially for people right at the bottom of British society who had nothing.
Right. A chance for a completely fresh start, maybe.
Exactly. We even have this one account, a woman transported early on, writing back to her daughter. And she says something like, "This is the garden of the world. Make sure you get here as soon as you can."
No way.
And guess what? Her daughter did turn up a few years later. So for some, it was a calculated risk, a gamble for a potentially better life.
So, okay, they arrive, they're not just surviving, they're actually discovering this entrepreneurial flair. I mean,
Yeah.
You mentioned the first fleet women immediately setting up brothels, which shows a quick grasp of market demand.
Right. Business savvy from day one.
But their ingenuity went way beyond that, didn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Women who were literally penniless back in England, they found incredible opportunities. They became pub owners, quite successful ones, dressmakers, hat makers, farmers, even store owners.
How did they manage that, setting up stores?
Well, they were shrewd. Sometimes they'd strike deals with sea captains, get goods brought over from England, or they'd be down at the docks, meeting the ships as they arrived, getting the best pick of the merchandise before anyone else. Real hustle.
And it wasn't just individual enterprise, was it? These convict women actually held a kind of social and economic power in the colony. How did that work?
It came down to labor, really. The free women settlers desperately needed servants. Running a household back then wasn't like today. It was heavy, relentless work. Making soap from scratch, candles, washing those enormous colonial dresses.
Oh yeah, a huge amount of work.
Exactly. And the crucial thing was, these convict women, they weren't really worried about getting sacked. Why not? Because there were so few of them and the demand was so high, there was always another job waiting just around the corner.
Scarcity gave them leverage.
Absolutely. An extraordinary amount of leverage and independence, really.
And that power, that independence, it sometimes spilled over into outright defiance, didn't it?
Oh, definitely. They frequently stood up to judges, to their employers. They'd refuse work they didn't want to do, and sometimes they just, well, vanished, absconded. The records show about 252 cases of women just disappearing from their assigned posts.
Just walking off the job, essentially.
Pretty much. But, while it's easy to see that as just pure resistance, we should probably consider the nuances. It's speculated that a fair number of those cases might have been more complex.
Like what?
Like, potentially women desperately trying to find their children who might have been taken away by the authorities earlier.
Oh, that adds a whole different layer.
Sure.
Heartbreaking.
It does. It puts a very human, poignant dimension onto those simple records of absconded.
That's a really important perspective. Shifting slightly, what about interactions between the white convict women and indigenous women? Do the records tell us much?
Unfortunately, very little. The records are really sparse on that specific topic. It's a major gap.
Really? Almost nothing.
There's one quite famous incident recorded by the pastoralist Elizabeth MacArthur. She wrote about an Aboriginal woman named Daring Ha bringing her baby over to show Elizabeth. A moment of connection.
Okay, so one specific instance.
But beyond things like that, direct documented interactions are very few and far between. We just don't have much detail.
So we're mostly left to speculate about how those encounters might have gone.
Pretty much, yeah. It seems plausible, maybe, that children could have been a point of connection, bridging that huge cultural gap. Maybe communication happened through, I don't know, basic sign language, shared gestures around mothering, that sort of thing. But it's speculation.
Okay, let's turn now to Molly Morgan, our case study. She really seems to embody so much of what we've been talking about. Born Mary Jones, 1762, Shropshire, England, daughter of a rat catcher and laborer. Became a dressmaker.
Yep, and she had an illegitimate child, also Mary Jones, in 1783, even before her marriage. Then she married William Morgan, a wheelwright, in 1785.
And then comes the crime. 1789, she and William are accused of stealing yarn. Sources differ a bit, maybe from a factory, maybe from the Sun Inn where Molly worked.
Right, and William manages to escape capture, but Molly doesn't. She's taken back to the inn, put in the cellar, and there's this dramatic report that she slashed her wrists trying to avoid hanging.
Good grief.
But a surgeon apparently sewed them up. She survived, was tried at the Shrewsbury Assizes, and sentenced to transportation for 7 years.
And she arrived at Botany Bay on the Neptune, part of the Second Fleet, June 28, 1790. And that ship, the Neptune, it was infamous, wasn't it? The hell ship Neptune.
Absolutely notorious. The conditions were horrific. Something like 31% of the convicts on board died during the voyage.
31%.
Yeah. And over half were sick on arrival. Just appalling ill treatment, disease. The master and the chief mate were actually privately prosecuted for murder later, though they got acquitted.
Unbelievable. But here's a twist.
Her husband, William Morgan.
Exactly. William, who'd escaped capture back in England.
He actually enlisted as a private in the New South Wales Corps, basically to avoid being arrested for his part in the theft.
So he arrives on the same ship, the Neptune, but as a free man, clearly intending to find Molly again.
It's quite a story. And they did reunite. Molly was sent to Parramatta. William joined her there. And once she got her ticket of leave, that conditional freedom document, they opened a small shop together.
But Molly's story is far from over. November 1794, she does something incredibly audacious again. She escapes from Australia, boards the storeship Resolution with 13 other convicts whose sentences weren't finished yet.
And makes her way all the way back to England, back to her children. Incredible determination.
So she's back in England. What happens then?
She sets herself up as a dressmaker again, this time in Plymouth. And then in 1797, she marries again. Bigamously, of course, because William was still alive back in Australia. Her new husband was Thomas Mears, a brass founder.
Okay, so trying to build a new life, but trouble finds her again.
It does. In 1803, there's an incident. Records are a bit fuzzy on the exact details again. Maybe their house burned down and Mears accused her. Other reports suggest it was debt, or maybe stealing some small items from a widow.
Whatever it was, the result was the same.
Yep. Tried at the Croydon Sessions, found guilty and sentenced to transportation. Again.
So she arrives back in Port Jackson for the second time.
Right.
June 1804, on the ship Experiment.
Right. And it's unknown if she even tried to find William this time around. Their paths had clearly diverged. She was sent to the Parramatta Female Factory, back to spinning wool, sewing clothes, washing.
But this isn't the end of her story, is it? Her life as a colonial entrepreneur really takes off after this second conviction.
It really does, but not immediately. First, more trouble. In 1814, she's caught branding government cattle as her own.
Bit ambitious.
You could say that. Found guilty, sentenced to another 7 years transportation, this time to the Newcastle Penal Settlement.
And Newcastle was known for being particularly harsh, right? For second offenders.
And extremely harsh. And she was 53 years old at this point. You'd think that might be the end of the line.
But somehow it wasn't.
No. By 1818, Governor Lachlan Macquarie may be impressed by her sheer persistence, her resilience. He grants her another ticket of leave, and he sends her to help establish a new settlement up at Wallace Plains, which is now Maitland.
And she gets land.
In her own right.
Yes, at a place called Horseshoe Bend. She clears it, cultivates it, using assigned convicts for labor, and then, very shrewdly, as the settlement starts to grow, she opens a wine shanty near the river. Profitable, too.
She just keeps finding ways. And then there's another marriage.
There is! March 1822. She marries Thomas Hunt. He was a young soldier stationed at the Wallace Plains Garrison.
Young.
Over 30 years younger than her. He was also a convict, transported for life for highway robbery, a brickmaker by trade. Molly Morgan certainly didn't follow convention.
Not even slightly. And her success continued. In November 1823, the next governor, Sir Thomas Brisbane, was apparently impressed by her efforts. He grants her a proper lease of 159 acres, which became a full grant later, and even gives her help from a convict clearing gang.
So she's building a real enterprise now.
Definitely. She buys another 203 acres at a place called Anvil Creek. And right in the middle of her main lease, she builds the Angel Inn. A proper inn this time, meant for the respectable settlers.
So by the mid-1820s, Molly Morgan is wealthy.
Remarkable so. The whole area, Wallace Plains, starts being known informally as Molly Morgan's. And the track heading towards Singleton, people called it Molly Morgan's Line of Road.
That's incredible. From convict twice over to having places named after her.
Yeah, the Australian newspaper in 1828 even named her one of the largest landholders on the entire Hunter River.
Did that wealth last?
Well, she did start subdividing her lease later on, selling off blocks for quick cash. Apparently, there were some irregularities with those sales that caused legal headaches down the track, so her wealth did decrease a bit towards the end. When she died, her remaining property was actually mortgaged. But still, what an achievement.
Absolutely. But what makes her story even more fascinating is the philanthropy.
Yeah.
You read descriptions of her as having this long record of petty crime, immorality, and self-indulgence.
Right. That's one side.
But then she's also described as a woman of generosity and compassion for those in unfortunate circumstances. How do those fit together?
It's the core contradiction, isn't it?
Yeah.
In 1827, she gave £100, a lot of money then, towards building a school. She ran what sounds like a rough-and-ready hospital on her property.
What's hospital?
Yeah, and she was even reputed to have ridden all the way to Sydney multiple times to plead with the governor directly on behalf of convicts who were sentenced to be executed.
That shows incredible compassion, really, going that far.
It really does. It speaks volumes about the complexity of her character. She wasn't just one thing.
Which brings us to maybe the most interesting part, her public image, how it shifted over time.
Yeah, this is where it gets really fascinating. Her reputation basically got worked over by journalists and illustrators for like 150 years, leading to these completely divergent pictures of her.
So on
one hand, you have her described as a respected pioneer, a generous employer, even a woman of strong personality and great influence. That was from Hobart's Voice back in 1934. Sounds pretty good.
Okay, the respectable version.
But then fast forward to, say, the Sunday Mirror in 1964, suddenly she's a buxom doxy. You know, a mistress, or worse, a female Casanova who loved men and rum, even a love huntress who lured men and told dirty jokes.
Wow. Talk about a contrast. So the respectable pioneer versus the body rogue.
Exactly. And her biographer kind of nailed it, summing up that contradiction, ascribing her as, the ex-convict with a long record of petty crime, immorality, and self-indulgence, who was also a woman of generosity and compassion.
That really captures it.
It shows she was just exceptional, an atypical character who completely defied the usual stereotypes. She stands out as this colorful and rather remarkable personality, especially when you consider most women convicts just kind of faded into the background of colonial history.
It's also worth just briefly touching on what happened to her first husband, William Morgan.
Ah, yes, William. The one who joined the NSW Corps, sometimes called the Rum Corps. Bit of a rough outfit to avoid getting arrested back in England.
Right, he was discharged from the Corps in 1794.
And after Molly made her escape back to England, William didn't stay single. He ended up living with another convict woman, Ellen Fraser. They had 5 children together between 1797 and 1806.
But they never married.
Nope, couldn't legally, because he was still married to Molly, technically.
Right, of course.
William got some land grants near Parramatta, but like many, he ran into financial problems later on. Sold his land, went back to working as a wheelwright and carpenter. He died in Liverpool near Sydney in 1828.
So their lives took very different paths in the end.
Very different. Molly herself died on June 27, 1835, out at Anvil Creek. She was 73. She was buried on her own property. Her last husband, Thomas Joe Hunt, the young soldier, actually died later from falling off a cart accidentally in Maitland.
But Molly's name lived on.
Oh, yeah. It endures. You can still find places like the Molly Morgan Range and Mount Molly Morgan on maps today. They're on traditional Wanneroo lands.
And her life, it even inspired a musical. In the 80s.
Yeah, 1983, a stage play called Mission Molly Morgan. Apparently it was quite something. Electric guitars, saxophones, drum kits.
Hardly authentic 1820s instruments.
Not exactly. And pop art style posters. Sounds like quite a production. Chris McQuaid starred as Molly.
And there's a vineyard now, too.
That's right, Molly Morgan Vineyard. Pays homage to her, tries to capture her spirit of, innovation and giving back. They even make a point of saying she supported the traditional owners of the land, connecting her legacy to Indigenous history as well. Her impact definitely continues to resonate.
So, stepping back, what does this all mean? What are the big takeaways from these stories, especially Molly's? It's so clear their lives rewrite our standard picture of early colonial Australia.
Absolutely. I think what these sources really drive home is the sheer power of individual agency. Even when you're facing the absolute worst circumstances, it reminds us that history isn't just made by the big names, the governors in general. It's also shaped profoundly by everyday people, even those completely cast aside by society, like these women.
Through just sheer will and ingenuity.
Exactly. Their resilience, that entrepreneurial spirit we talked about, it wasn't just about surviving, it was an active force, building the very fabric of the new colony.
And Molly Morgan just embodies that perfectly, doesn't she? The contradictions, the complexity, two-time convict, accused of serious crimes, yet becomes this successful businesswoman, landowner, even philanthropist.
Her journey completely challenges us to ditch those simple black and white labels we often stick on historical figures.
Yeah.
It forces us really to embrace the full, messy, complex, often contradictory truth of a person's life.
Which does raise that important question, doesn't it? How do we, listening to this, how do we reconcile these conflicting narratives?
Yeah.
Is it about picking the good version or the bad version?
Or is it about understanding that most people, especially someone who lived a life like Molly Morgan's, are rarely just one thing? It's about holding those contradictions together.
Embracing the whole picture.
Exactly. Embracing the complexity.
And it makes you wonder, perhaps, what other defiant women from history are still out there, waiting for their full, surprising, complex stories to finally be told, waiting for us to uncover their real impact.